So I just got done watching House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 8, titled The Queen Who Ever Was, and let's just get it right out of the way. That's kind of a cheesy name. I mean, let's be real, it's always gonna be difficult following up an episode called The Red Sewing, but still, The Queen Who Ever Was? Does that even make grammatical sense? Oh well, let us hope they can come up with some better titles for the final 2 episodes of this season. Oh no, wait. This was the finale, wasn't it? I guess we should get into it. So I recently put out a video where I spoke about my flaws with House of the Dragon's second season. How I thought that the characters were being far too inactive, how the pace was moving far too slowly, and how the writers seemingly did not want to give anyone in the story, but especially the women, any kind of ambition or desire for power, making for a lot of scenes where characters just sort of stand around and repeat the same stuff over and over again about avoiding war, which does not only make for a pretty boring time, but also stands in great contrast to the book the whole thing is based off, and the final couple episodes of the show's first season, which were very much dedicated towards setting up all of the stakes and conflict and emotions and tragedy which had been boiling under the surface throughout the season and were seemingly just about to burst at the seams. Now, don't get me wrong, there had been lots to praise about these first 6 episodes, such as the character of Aegon Targaryen essentially stealing every scene he was in, or the Battle of Rook's Rest, which was tense, exciting, and pretty disturbing. Like, they really nailed the terror of what happens when dragon clashes with dragon, but for the most part, House of the Dragon's second season was, at least for me, kind of disappointing. It felt like the creators were stretching the story out as much as they could, resulting in a majority of the episodes just feeling like even more setup for a payoff which never came. It was weird. And clearly the fans of this show can't seem to make their mind up either on what exactly this season has been. I mean, if you go into the comments of that original video I put out, you have half of the audience agreeing with me and half of the audience telling me I'm completely wrong. Even George R.R. Martin's views on this show are puzzling, with the now 75-year-old author taking to his blog to both praise the show and seemingly criticize it, albeit a little more subtly. So overall, both the show and the reaction to it just left me in a state of confusion. And then we got episode 7, The Red Sewing, last week, and my faith in this show was somewhat restored. In many ways, it felt like my prayers were being answered. We finally saw characters such as Daemon and Rhaenyra taking action, with the latter gathering a ton of new innocent Targaryen bastards on Dragonstone, and basically acting out some sort of medieval battle royale in an attempt to find some dragon riders to help her cause, while getting rid of any who could threaten her claim or join the Greens. It was a brilliant scene in my opinion, which not just showed us how far television has come as a medium when it comes to delivering high-budget spectacle, but also how ruthless and hungry Rhaenyra truly is. Yes, the episode was still mainly set up, but surely in episode 8 things would finally come to fruition, right? Right? I'm gonna be honest. There was a lot riding on this episode of television. If it had knocked it out of the park, things would have really started to look up for this franchise. Think about it, there would have been dancing in the streets. People would be proclaiming that The Winds of Winter was coming out next week. However, having just finished this episode, I can already tell that this is not to be the case. Unfortunately, this finale confirmed my worst suspicions that this whole season of television has just been more preparation. Say what you will about House of the Dragon's first season, it certainly wasn't perfect, but at least a lot of stuff happened in it. You know, it spanned 17 years, it was a proper story. In contrast, what has even happened this season outside of Rook's Rest and The Red Sewing? Honestly, it spends so much time doing so little that by the time the armies are finally marching, by the time multiple battles are about to start, the show runs out of space. I mean, where have we seen that before? That's just a joke. A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons are both excellent books, but do you know what I'm saying? No wonder the characters have felt so stagnant this season. It all makes sense now. I feel like the creators of the show saw how Game of Thrones became really rushed in its second half and said, well, we can't do that. But then just went way too far in the other direction, because at this pace the story won't conclude for another 10 years. I mean, what's season 3 even going to be like? Are we gonna have to have more scenes where Rhaenyra looks into the distance angrily before proceeding to do nothing? More scenes of Jacaerys mewing in the background? I don't know, I guess we'll have to find out. But anyway, let's talk about this episode, this so-called finale. I think you can split up the stuff in this episode into 2 factions. Number 1, things that I liked / didn't mind, but which aren't exactly season finale material. And number 2, things that I absolutely had a problem with. Let's start with number 1. I really liked the conversation between Kristen Cole and Gawain Hightower. I'm not exactly sure how the latter found out that the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard was bedding his sister, but nevertheless, it was a well-written scene. I also found the conflict between Aemond and Helena to be pretty fascinating. I wish this relationship had been a bigger focus throughout this season. I think it would have made the whole question about whether she would go to war on her dragon even more interesting, but whatever. Still rather tense. I enjoyed the dynamic between the ultra-casual Ulf and everyone else on Team Black, who is of course very serious and courteous. It was funny. And the Tywin Lannister stuff, I actually had lots of fun with. I imagine most people are gonna hate these scenes for just being completely pointless, and I wouldn't entirely disagree, but you need to understand, I'm personally a big Lannister fan. I think Jefferson Hall plays the character very well, and yeah. Let's just say I didn't mind any of these scenes. However, they should absolutely not have been in this episode, in the season finale, and they end up feeling like filler. And then we have the things I had a problem with. So throughout this season, I have been clamoring for Rhaenyra to show some agency and determination. We had to wait until episode 7 for this, but eventually with the Red Sowing, we finally witnessed her moral ambiguity coming to the forefront, as she sacrificed innocence to acquire more dragons. Like I've already said, it was a great scene, and in the finale, we see her preparing to burn cities to the ground, to kill innocents so she can win the throne. It finally feels like we're getting somewhere with this character, only for Alicent to arrive on Dragonstone and tell Rhaenyra that Helena will surrender King's Landing to her, and that she will let Aegon, her half-burnt son, be killed. Not only is this a bizarre move from Alicent which completely comes out of nowhere, but it once again is the show teasing us of a more morally questionable Rhaenyra, prepared to actually do something tricky in order to win the throne, only to pull the rug away from us at the last second and say, never mind, there must be a peaceful solution to all of this. This is a show about war, may I remind you. It's literally taking the little amount of development that has occurred this season with these characters and throwing it away. Then we have the Daemon stuff, which reveals to us all that his entire Harrenhal arc this season of perhaps betraying Rhaenyra and having these weird psychedelic dreams which cleverly delve into his inner psyche and relationship with his family were all just so he could have a vision of the White Walkers and Daenerys and realize he needs to stick by his wife because he's part of some bigger story or whatever. Now, first of all, it has to be said outright, why are you even connecting this show to the White Walkers? We briefly saw the writers do it last season with the whole Song of Ice and Fire thing, and I guess I was a fool for thinking they'd leave it there. But seriously, after 6-7 episodes of exploring all the family trauma Daemon carries, you're going to choose one of the most butchered plotlines in the history of fiction to be the reason he decides to bend the knee to Rhaenyra. It honestly makes me think that they must plan to retcon the final few seasons of Game of Thrones, or just remake the thing entirely, because why on earth would you bring this plot point back? It's completely bizarre to me. In this universe, a Targaryen isn't even sitting on the Iron Throne when the White Walkers are defeated. Hell, they aren't even defeated by a Targaryen at all. It was Arya who killed the Night King, remember? Oh man, it's such a mess. At no point did this feel like a season finale. It actually felt like an episode 8 of a 10-episode season. Now, I understand that this season was cut short due to budgetary constraints, which is of course out of the control of the writers, but it seems to me that instead of condensing what was planned into 8 episodes, they just cut the final 2 episodes out. You know, where the interesting stuff happens, leaving us with what exactly? It's a season of setup which just isn't that interesting outside of a few scenes, and that's a shame, especially after the first season showed so much promise. Don't get me wrong, I'm still interested to see what season 3 of this show does in 2 years' time. I really hope it can get this series back on the right track, but honestly, when it comes to this universe, I'm going to keep my expectations low. George R.R. Martin recently claimed there to be 7 more Game of Thrones spin-offs in the works. And I'll be honest, when I saw that he said that, I just burst out laughing. I'm usually not one to be cynical, but I do just think that without the main story ever looking like it's going to be finished, I really don't see the point anymore with any of these shows. I would take the Winds of Winter over all of them combined, and I imagine most A Song of Ice and Fire fans would agree with me there. Anyway, that's going to be it for now. Please let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments, as well as season 2 as a whole. How well will this season age? What do you think its legacy will be? Where does it rank in terms of the 8 seasons of Game of Thrones? I would personally say it's about on the same level as season 7, which is pretty harsh, but that's just how I feel. But yeah, thanks for watching, I hope you have a good day, and I will see you in the next one.